Welcome back to my budget app series, where I attempt to create a personal finance application as a side project from scratch and document the process on YouTube. Last video we set up the Tailwind CSS theme. This time we'll start working on the components library, which we will use to build the Budget Warden web client. Let's jump into the code and talk about some details on that. Start, this is the Figma design we created in one of the videos in the series, and in it, I have the component section. The application uses quite a few components. The components library is very concise, but we have to implement them, starting with the buttons that include a normal textual button and a button with an icon. We also have icons, which will be a separate component. These tables with progress bars, and they will essentially be a data grid to a large extent, meaning you would have to modify items by clicking and editing in the fields. In addition, we have the basic form components, which include inputs, text areas, checkboxes, and radio. The typography we already handled last video with the Tailwind config. The typography is not a component per se, and we just styled the default HTML elements and provided the font size utilities to Tailwind, more like. And we have a modal dialog for forms and other items, which we have to implement as well. So in this video, we won't have time to implement, the video would be too long if we implement all of the components, especially the table, the grid, the data grid, which would take a significant amount of time, and the dialog. So my initial plan, starting now, is to first set up the component library repository. I'll talk about this in a bit, and create the buttons, icons, and form components. And I will split it into two videos. In the next video, I plan to implement the tables and data grids and the modal dialog. This way the videos should be relatively concise and somewhat separated in terms of meaning and concern. Now, to start, I made the decision to basically implement the components in a separate repository, which will be a component library, React component library using Vite. Now, just a remark, you could go a couple of routes here. This is the best way in terms of maintainability, in my opinion. We have Tailwind CSS. You can style the components as React components entirely with utilities. That is possible. In terms of the size of the shipped CSS in your whole project, that would probably be optimal because you'll be reusing Tailwind utilities throughout. That route I don't want to take because, in my experience, utility classes are great when you compose components into a layout, when you define spacings between components, and when you slightly tweak component defaults, like colors, font sizes, spacings, etc. When you start implementing your entire component base with utilities, the maintainability aspect suffers a bit. Utilities are not the best thing in terms of maintainability. That's just my opinion. So I opt to take this hybrid architecture. We will style our components separately. They will have CSS modules. And to do that, I could either add the components to the BW client repository where my Next.js app is and style them there, which wouldn't be bad per se, especially since these components are currently used only for this project. They are crafted for this project. On the other hand, if I have a separate repository of my components, I can add the storybook there, meaning the documentation for them, so that it's separate from the client. I can write tests there that are separate from my client or component. And overall, the client will have the responsibility of hosting the real web client code, data fetching, events, layouts, composition of views, and not basically the component code will not live there. Only I think it's a great separation of concerns for the client to not house the basic components. And additionally, if we build another application related to this app, which we might actually, like a different kind of application, like a mobile app or whatever, we can reuse the components, maybe with tweaks, but the same repository will be available with these somewhat unopinionated set of components, which are usable anywhere. All right, so We'll set up a repo with Vite, separate repository and project. We will publish an npm package and install the components library in the client later. After that, we will set up Storybook, implement buttons, icons, and if we have time, the form components in this video. This is a lot of work, so let's start. First of all, let's go to Vite and the getting started guide to generate a project. It's quite simple with npm create Vite. I have a terminal open. I'll go to my dev drive and basically here I have the mono repo. We will add this project to the mono repo at some point. Let me just remove this folder because I was doing some tests. We'll add the project with the UI to the mono repo, not because it's not a part of the Docker deployment or the Docker development environment, but it would be convenient to just develop in one repository. That's the point of the mono repo. But for now, I will just create a project here with npm create Vite. I will call it BWI for Budget Warden UI, and I'll go with React TypeScript. I will not use SWC because I want to use rollup. There are some features I want to use related to the styles, which I will. Okay, I have my project now. I will go to BWUI and run npm install as Vite is basically prompting me to do. Once this installation finishes, I open VS Code and now we can work on this component library. So first things first, I want to install types node as a dev dependency. We'll need it. All right. Next up, we will set up Vite. Vite is currently in its application mode. So if I run npm run dev, I get the Vite app with a counter, some React component. And all of the code is here in source. We have an index.html. I want to set up Vite in its library mode. It does have such a mode in the building for production section. So as it says here, you have to change the build config here in Vite config.js. And basically, let me copy these changes and we'll modify them. This is the new build config for lib. So what we care about, first of all, is an entry point. I could either, as you can see here in Vite, they recommend creating a lib directory and leaving the source as it is. I don't want to do that. I was thinking about, yeah, I will use the source directory. Directly for the components, I will use Storybook to mount the components and debug. So that should be fine. So I remove everything here. That is for the demo app. I'll leave the Vite environment TypeScript file. And the main file will now be a normal TypeScript file, not a React, not a TypeScript TSX file. And after that, we set the entry point to this. Now I will import resolve from path. That's why I needed types node, for example. And besides that, let me see. The name of the library will be BWUI. The file name as well. I'll remove these unnecessary comments. Okay. And we have rollup options. And here we externalize dependencies that shouldn't be bundled into the library. And in this case, we want to externalize dependencies. Right now, if I build it, React and React DOM will basically be bundled with the components, which I don't want. I just want the components. So I'll add these two. Let me see, is there anything else? There shouldn't be, honestly. Yeah, there shouldn't be anything else. Just these two. And these now really become dev dependencies at this point, because we don't bundle them with the end application. And I can leave this actually as a peer dependency so that when I install the library in another project, it will know that it's expected that this project will be using React and React DOM. All right. And besides that, here we don't need globals at all. This is set up for view, which is not necessary in this case. All right. Yeah, let me leave the comma last. It's more convenient. Besides that, this is fine. The TS config is all right. I will clear the README file. I'll, update this off camera so that the repository will be clean and nice. The build is left the same way. and the TypeScript compiler because we're still compiling the source file. Let's actually run a build now. It should build in this directory. Let me see. Couldn't resolve. All right, I have a typo. It's not main.js, it's main.ts. Let's rerun the build. All right. And in this, we have, yeah, the empty file. All right. Now we do get the Vite SVG here because by default, Vite copies everything from the public folder, which we still have. I think I can just remove the public folder and that will be over. All right. Now we need TypeScript definitions. For that, we can use this plugin, Vite DTS plugin. Let me install it right now. It will auto-generate the TypeScript definitions we need as a dev dependency. Let me actually zoom so that it's more visible what we're doing. All right, so we have the Vite DTS plugin. Let me go back to the documentation. It's quite straightforward though. Just initialize DTS and import it first. I'll copy both. And let me see. Oh, also that would be useful. Formats ES. That should be the target. And now let's import the plugin. Quite straightforward. And here in plugins, we will do React and then DTS with its default settings. Let's build again. All right. The good thing, we don't have the UMD file anymore, only the ES target and the declaration files. Here it is. They're both empty right now at this point. So let's write a function here. Just whatever function, it doesn't matter at this point. Yeah, as that, we will export that function, for example. And if I build now, we should get both declarations, the codes, yes, and the declarations. Awesome. Of course, this is a dummy function. I'll remove it right now. What else do we need to do? We need to define a component at this stage. Now, this main file will import and export all of the components. I will create a components folder where, for example, we'll have a button, that's for sure. And let's declare a simple button. This, of course, will not be our final button, just something. That button component will have props children, and let's just have that for now. Nothing else. Besides that, I need to define its props, which will be a read-only object. All right. Set this type to button props. And what else do we have? We have to export it. And that's pretty much a component. Now, yeah, a very basic component, but a component nonetheless. And this main file will export button from components. Yeah, that should work. Wait. Oh, no. Button is inside the button folder. All right. And now let's rerun the build and see what we have. We should get our button here. Okay. Now, first of all, React is inside the bundle, so that's wrong. That shouldn't be the case. We have the button type definitions, which is good. And I think I have button. I do, yeah. Okay, so the issue here primarily right now is that React is bundled. Let me see. So I saw what the issue is. I need to define as external React and the React JSX runtime. Now let's rebuild again. This time, bundle should be smaller. Yes. And we only have our button and its type definitions. Great. This is awesome. Now the next step right here is to add some styles to our button. And the styles will be Sass modules. The good thing is Vite supports Sass. I just need to install it as a dev dependency. I'll do that. And let's just add a button class, which will not do much. I will set it to some blue background and white color. That will be all. I just want to test styles. We will add more meaningful styles later to implement our button. And now I will import styles from this file. There we go. And class name of button will be styles button. Great. Let's run. Come on. All right. So let's run build and see what we get. Oh yeah, here's what we get. Basically, our button gets a class name, which is great. And we get a bundle of the CSS styles, which is good, but I don't want to take this route. In some cases, you might want to take this route. If you want your component libraries theme, so to speak, and core styles to be a single file which you import. I want separate files imported in each individual component. And to do that, I can use another plugin, which will be the Vite plugin libinject CSS. So let's do that right now. As you can see, what this plugin does is just imports the CSS file in the JavaScript modules, which is great. And to use it, I have to install it, of course, as a dev dependency. So let me do that. And we have to change the Vite config again, because it's a plugin. So let's go to the Vite config. Here's the libinject import. We add it as a plugin. I think, let me think, is the order important? Here we have DTS, type decorations, not important. React, yeah, here should be fine. Let me see. We have entry. Yeah, that should be all right. Let me check. Yeah, that should be the entire config we need to at least import a file. We will need to chunk the items, but that's later. Let's now build again and see what's happening. Okay, yeah, this time we have a main CSS file, which is the same, but it's imported in our JavaScript. Again, I don't want that because this would basically work. If I import button, I'll get the entire styles, but I want only the button styles if I import button, only the icon styles if I import an icon, etc. Just modules. And to do that, I've saved this page to the rollup documentation. There is a good explanation how to do that. So I'll copy this. What we do is basically change the rollup config input and output, and we use the glop paths and file URL to path to basically set inputs as separate files, and then we will essentially output them also as separate files. So let's import that right now. These are what we need as imports here. All right. Yeah, this is because its value is never read. And also, we don't have a glop decoration. All right, we can fix that. Basically, I will first install glop because we don't have it. All right. And besides that, I also need a couple of more imports. I have these glop and file URL to path, but I will also need this basically extension name and relative in addition to resolve from path. All right, that should be sufficient in terms of imports. And let me copy the additional rollup config we need. You will be able to look that up in the repository, linked in the description, of course. You don't need to type this out, or you can just look up the documentation as well. And here we have the inputs. So let me see. I will import glop, not glop sync. Yeah, that was old syntax basically. So let's see. We take everything from source, all TypeScript and TSX files, and we basically map them as an array. This is relative to source. We just, that basically slices using the extension. And finally, this basically transforms the file URL to path, as it says. Very straightforward. Because we just generate basically an array of arrays. And in addition to that, we need to check out again the inject CSS plugin. It does say a few things about that option of chunking. We need to set up these output options. All right. And we need to set the asset file names and the entry file names. This will basically be for the the asset files in this case will be the generated styles. You'll see in a bit what I mean. If we build now, we'll get a chunked build this time, hopefully. All right. So you see, we have this assets button CSS, which only includes the button CSS. Then we have components button that includes the type definitions, and the button JavaScript that includes only the button CSS, which is awesome. And the main file will not import all styles, but it just imports button and exports it. That's really great. That's all we wanted. And in addition, we have styles, and yeah, we can bundle them. If I create a second component just to test, for example, follow the convention and say cart, we'll remove that. We don't really have a cart. If this is cart TSX and it's just a component, whatever component with whatever class name, IntelliSense is really not helping me in this case. Yeah, let's just say cart like this. I'll export that, of course. And let's create a cart module SAS to test, just to test the functionality with multiple components. That's important. And here we'll have a cart class with just whatever, background red, padding 1M. Again, this is just a fake component. But even though it's a fake component, if I build still a component, it should be bundled and included. And it does. Yeah, here's the CSS. Here's the CSS for button and for cart. We also have, what do we have? Yeah, the button JavaScript includes the button styles. The cart JavaScript includes the cart styles, which is exactly what we want. So at this stage, we are ready to actually set up our storybook, which is the next step in the process. Now, the storybook, if you're not familiar, is basically a sort of a component documentation, component gallery, component reference, however you want to call it. And we use React with Vite. This is how you initialize your storybook. The good thing about it is we'll be able to develop our components, preview them, and document them at the same time. Now, this might take a while, so I will resume the video when the storybook generates. Okay, my storybook just generated, and it opened, started its dev server and opened my storybook. It automatically generates some fake components and stories, but this is what it is basically. Here you have your components, and there are stories with different states where you can basically inspect them. Here you can copy the actual code, and you have an auto-generated documentation based on your component props and code, which is great. You can also include markdown pages like this. Now, once we have this generated, it does include scripts in the package.json npm storybook, which runs the storybook, and a build script, which will generate the documentation as a static site. But what we're interested in now is the source stories. Here we have a couple of stories which we can delete. Configure MDX. This is the markdown sample markdown file. And these stories for header, I'll remove basically everything that is not button because I don't need it. I'll use the button for reference. And these assets are just for the markdown page, which was included. So the button story, I will not have a separate stories folder. I will include the story right here. Actually, yeah, let me paste it. And I'll remove the stories folder. And I rename this to button with lowercase stories TS. So yeah, I need to modify the story. I use this story as a template for all my components. to basically render my button. I don't need this, and I'll import my button from its button file with lowercase. I rename the title to components button. This is basically a category of sorts. Component button tells Storybook what component to mount. In terms of parameters, I want a centered layout. That is fine. This will just center the component in the preview window. Auto docs will generate the automatic documentation, which I do want. And I don't need argument types. These are basically fields of different types. They can be textual fields, switches, selects, based on which you can render different states. That's for documentation purposes. We'll use them and demonstrate how to work with them later when we create the actual components, probably. For now, I want to just make sure the storybook is working. And here we have the actual stories, which are button states in this case. I'll leave 2 in order to basically demonstrate now. And then we'll modify them appropriately. And I'll just change the children inner text based on these for now, because it's my only prop in that fake button component. Not children, I want primary button text here. And that should do it. npm run storybook should run the storybook again. And basically we have our button story. So when it opens, here we go. We have components and button. And I have the documentation. First of all, everything is working. I mean, we have the button component with a HTML button element and its styles, which is great so far. And we have basically the props, which is just children in this case. I can change them here in real time to just see how that would affect them. When I have more props, which is almost always when you have a component, you can play with it here. We have a preview, we can see the code to use the actual button. And we have the stories, which is primary and secondary. And we can see their code as well. Now, yeah, the stories themselves can be browsed individually as well. In addition, we have some options here. These are the argument types. Essentially, these also are the argument type controls. And we can set up later actions, visual testing. That's useful. And demonstrate interactions. But for now, we'll use it primarily to develop and see the actual components in this view and play with the props, and to document and reference the component library. And it's working great. The setup of Storybook is complete. Now we don't have a Git repository, but the last step we need to do to make sure this repo is workable, and I'll remove that index.html file because it's a component library now and we don't need it. The last step is to let's create a GitHub repository for it. Okay, I authenticated to GitHub. Now, as I was saying, I want to create a repository so that a remote repository so that we can push the code there. And in addition, publish that to npm, install it in the client using Next.js, and make sure everything there is working correctly. Now, the status, we need to initialize the repository, add all changes, and create the first commit. Up to this point, change the branch to main if it isn't, okay. Add the remote and push to origin main. And it's now here, okay. Now, next up, to publish to npm, we need to do npm version patch to create a new version and tag 001, that's correct. And yeah, git push with tags origin main. This will push the tag to GitHub. Let me see, yeah, we have one tag. Here it is, 001. And the last step is npm publish to publish version 001. And here we have a couple of things we actually need to set up beforehand. Now, first, this is private. That's not going to work. Next up, we need to change the name to my namespace. I will put it in my personal namespace, that is fine. We need the main entry point, which will be, let me just check that quickly in the reference. Yeah, so I just quickly checked the reference. So yeah, main of course isn't array. The main entry point will be source, main, no, excuse me, of course, dist main.js. All right. The types will be what? Dist main.dts. And we also need to include the files array, which will just include the dist directory. That should be enough. Now we handle the dependencies and we have the peer dependencies as well. Let me see. Do we have reactive here? Yeah, we do. All right. Well, that's awesome. And now let me do npm publish again. We should get an error because, yeah, payment required. Of course, we need to, how was it? npm publish with access public, I think. The first time we publish. Let me see if it was like that. Otherwise, I will, yeah. The first publish, you need to specify access public. And now we should have it in npm. If you haven't walked into npm in your command line, it might prompt you. You just, it will tell you the command. I think it was npm login or authenticate, whatever. It will just redirect you to npm.js to log in. And if I go to npm.js now and packages, I should have, yeah, BWUI pushed a few seconds ago, which is great. Now I can go back into, actually, let's open the monorepo folder, add it to the workspace. There we have the client. Let me see, BW web client. Okay. And I'll go into it in my terminal. No, the BW monorepo first, packages, and the web client. And I can install as a dependency now BWUI. That shouldn't take long. And now in my package JSON, I have my BWUI, and that means I can run the Next.js application in the monorepo. I don't even need to run it with Docker. It's fine. I just want to test if everything is working. And here we have some rectangle, which I'm sure we added last time to just check if everything is, yeah, working. Tailwind is working. And beneath it, I will just import the button I created from BWUI, and I will use it. Let's see. Works as expected. Styles are imported. Everything is working very well. All right. So basically this checked the entire continuity from the creation and the build process of the BWUI repository to its usage in our client application. And now we can concentrate on actually implementing components. As you can see, the setup was not very trivial. I removed the monorepo from the workspace and focus only on the client, on the components library right now. Let me go into BWUI. By the way, as I mentioned off camera, I will add BWUI to the monorepo. Trivial work, you can see the monorepo setup for how I will do it, just a git sub module, so that I can work with one repository locally. But now let's focus on the components. I will remove this card component entirely, and we have a button already, so let's focus on actually implementing the button here from the Figma design. Now, one thing to know. Here we have covers, which we already added to our Tailwind theme. Now, one drawback of this approach of having a separate UI library is that if you start adding covers here and a cover theme, you get basically two themes, which you have to synchronize. I will not do that. All of these opinionated items will be CSS variables, at least that's my plan, so that I can use this UI library as a very, this UI library will be very unopinionated. Still, it will implement all the features needed so that I can include the button in the Budget Warden web client and just set a few variables with covers. That's at least my plan. A few styling variables, yeah. Okay, so the primary button. Let's, we need to have the ability to add an icon, and this icon will be the other icon component. So that means, as you can see here, icon is separated very well. We have a couple of options. One option is to essentially have this primary, this being the inner text, this being a button, HTML element. That's absolutely necessary for accessibility. That would be the simple case. And the icon case will be the text. The icon will be basically an element next to the text node, and it will be positioned here, absolutely, and the spacing for it will be reserved with extra padding in case the icon is there. This is option number 1. Option number 2, divs are not valid in a button, technically. Spans are. You can have basically two inner elements here, and they will have their own padding. They will be positioned with flex so that they're vertically centered, and when this icon is not available, its element will basically be collapsed. It won't even be rendered. This is React. So in this case, we'll have a button and a span, an extra element here. In this case, we'll have a button and two spans inside of it. I like this more because this way I can modify the font size of both inner items and the size of the icon, and it will work flawlessly because the icon won't be absolutely positioned and fixed to a certain height and width. That's more flexible in my opinion, so that's the route I will go to. One extra thing, I use BEM, the BEM convention, for the class names of the components and their styles. This is just a choice. You can go many routes. Realistically speaking, you can write your own class names. Again, I told you you could use Tailwind for these. Absolutely, if you want to, and that's maintainable and nice in your opinion. And also you can use StyleX. You can check it out. I will probably make a video about it. StyleX, doesn't solve class naming, solves other CSS issues like similar CSS issues that BEM solves, particularly related to cascading conflicts. All right, let's not waste any more time with just gibberish. Now, yeah, the button class will remain button. That's for sure. I will run Storybook. The good thing is Storybook is running in real time and it's set up very well for development. So we can use it that way. And here's the button. I will open primary because here we also have a button to remount on the top left corner if we don't want to refresh. And now we have to reset its appearance, which is quite simple actually. Just set border to none, backgrounds to none. We'll set a background in a bit, but yeah, that should be fine. Outline to none. It's a button, so it's quite straightforward. Now, as I said, I will use variables for the colors. Still, I will set some sensible defaults right here. So let's start with the background. These are basically sensible defaults for, let me just close some unnecessary tabs which I have and only have the design and storybook. This book color is not very opinionated, so that will be the default if a variable is not provided. So I will use that. So this will be background color. Now the variable naming is important. I will do the BWUI and then button, the component name, and then background color. That's long. BG color is fine. Yeah. It's a bit longer, but scalable because we have the namespace, the component, and then the actual variable name. And here we'll set the default. All right, let's check it out. We have our color. Now we need to set color as well. Default white. Awesome. Quite good. Now we won't have the font here. That's not very good. We will not have the font indeed. We could import the font. I haven't thought about this until now. This isn't the biggest problem in the world, by the way. We'll just kind of implement them blindly. Won't be able to test them very well. I was looking for a solution to this font issue because I don't want to include the later font as a bundle in the component library. That's crazy. I don't want that. This component library shouldn't be font specific or anything like that. But I want it in my storybook because I want to see real renders right now, based on how basically the components will look in Budget Warden. So to do that, I was taking a look that I can actually include the font and style for the default font in the storybook. And I can do that in the preview head HTML file. So let me see if I even have it right now. I don't, but I can create it probably. I hope so. Let's see. And here I can include the Google font. So let's go to Google Fonts, find Lato. No, that's not search. Lato, and let's include it. Embed code. Great. 10,000. Yeah, I don't care about performance too much in this case for the storybook. Loading time is not my concern. And I want styles. I'll just do an inline style for HTML body. Set every font family to Lato. Now if we refresh right here, I might need to, I don't know if it actually changed that. It mentioned in the documentation that you won't see live reload, hot module reloading based on this header file. Now, did that change? That's interesting. Let me see. Let's inspect the element and see what the font is. Primary button, font is Arial. Did not change. Yeah, so I'll just change the selector to everything in the storybook and that should solve the issue. Let me check. Yeah, we have Lato. So now we have the Lato font. That's a good start. That is in the documentation and not in the actual, in the actual component library, which was the point. Now the default font size, this will be Lato bold, which is whatever. We need a bolder font. Now, again, this will be BWUI font size. Okay. Button font size. I would actually do that. Camel case. Or, yeah, the last segment will be camel case. I think that's better. And here we'll do the default font size, which is 14. Okay. No, 1M. Yeah, absolutely. 1 rem. Font weight will be button font weight, and it will be 700. I think the default bold is, yeah, actually 700 is semi-bold maybe. I think bold is 900 or not. Extra bold is 900. Yeah, 700 is the default we need here. All right. These resets are valid. We don't have a border appearance, whatever. We have a border radius, which is 10. Um, 10 pixels. In reality, let me think. Yeah, not RAM based. This should be probably fixed. No, in the Tailwind config, I think it was, yeah, so it was relative in the Tailwind config, so we want all radiuses to be consistent. So I'll go with 0.71 RAM. Let's go with triple digit precision, as always. And at this point, let's see what we have. Okay, that's pretty good. Now, let me check. Do we have any paddings by default? I think there are. Yeah, let's for sure reset all margins and padding on the button. Great. That's awesome. And as I said, we will need to add 2 span elements here. But for now, I'll just add the first element, which will be for the content. I need to name it somehow. Content would be good. That should work. Yeah, content and like this. Okay, I will change this for consistency because I dislike it otherwise. Yeah, BEM class names are don't really work well with objects right here in CSS modules, but that's fine. I think it's maintainable and readable either way. And it's easy to understand which part of the component is what. Now, yeah, button content should have padding. That's what it should have. And that padding is what? 12, 7, 7, 12. Let's calculate that. This is based on 14 pixels base font size. So this means 0.857 padding on the site. Let me do that. Now padding will not be a variable. And top and bottom will be what? 7, 0.5. Okay. Let me see now. Okay. Yeah. All right. So far so good. It's actually, this button is kind of close to visually implemented. I say visually because there are a lot of details still. Besides that, now I need to cover the hover states, which I want to cover right now. This will be quite simple. Cover and focus. Okay. And we need to change the background color. In that case, the thing is, the background color is in my Tailwind config. I just picked it then, and I need to, the default cover color, of course. Let me open the mono repo. I only open that file from it, the Tailwind config. Here it is. And that will be, I think, Bootu. Yeah, Bootu. So this will be a variable bw UI button cover bg hover color, and this will be the default. Okay, good. Let's check it out. Cover and focus. Here we need transitions. I will transition background color in 2 seconds. And that is great. And we focus. Okay. So I will set cursor to pointer. This might be controversial. Some people prefer to use this only for links. In this case, I will use it for all buttons in the application. I think it's, yeah, there's basically a lot of opinions about this. You don't need to. For basic buttons that are not links, set the cursor to pointer, but a lot of applications are doing it recently, not just using the pointer for links, so I'll do it as well. I find it nicer. Okay, besides that, the styling of this basic button is kind of done, I believe. Yeah. I want to focus now on the icon part of it. Of course, the icon part of it requires an icon. So I'll do that in a bit. Let me think. Should I do icons or the actual props first? Yeah, let's do props first. And then we'll do icons. So of course, we won't just have children. At the very least, here we need class name. We can have additional classes here. Because of that, this needs to be a little bit more complicated. Not a lot, but a little bit. Props class name will be used here. Okay. On click, which will be a function. These are optional. So the on click will be props on click. Function is not assignable to mouse event handler HTML button element. So we have to change that. There we go. Let me see. This is React mouse event handler. Okay, good. Yeah, this handles the on click, class names, and children. Now, besides that, let me think. Do we need anything else? Now, how are we going to include icons? There are two options. We can include the icon as a prop, or we can include the icon as an element inside. But if we include the icon as an element, the content has to, as another component inside button, as children. But this button content then has to also be a separate component, and I don't like that approach. So the icon will be a separate prop. But for now, I'll set it to string because we don't have the icon component type. Okay, let's see now. Yeah, that should handle it for now. Of course, this is not the final thing. We can add more props, more functionality as we need them. I'm just trying to cover as much as possible now. Now, let's create the icon component, and then we can come back to the button and implement the actual icon. To do so, let's take a look at the icons. They will be inline SVG elements. The challenge here is how do we implement them? As I want them to be inline SVGs, they can just be a React component. Now, by the way, I won't implement all of them. I'll implement one and I'll do the others off camera so that I don't waste video time on repetitive work. I can export the SVG first for this, for example, and Figma provides an archive. Let's extract it. So we have this add icon. So far, so good. I will inspect its markup, copy it, and in components, I will create a separate folder in, let me think. Yeah, I'll create a separate icons folder. Although they will be components, they're kind of different. So this is the add icon, right? Yeah, called add or plus, whatever. I'll call it plus. I think it's more appropriate. And here I'll just create a React component, which will be plus icon, which will return SVG markup. This is just one way. There are loaders that do this as well, stuff like that. This is simple, not hard to maintain, so I like it as an approach. Now we need to clear up the SVG markup a bit. As you can see, we have clip paths from Figma. We can remove them. That's just a rectangle. So when we remove the clip path, we're left with just a single path, which is great. That's how most icons should look, at least icons like this one. I'll remove the fill. I want the fill to be SVG white. And that's basically it. I'll remove the width and height. Although no, I'll need to set them, but with props and the fill. The view box we need. It's necessary. And the XMLNS declaration. And now we need props. These props will be width. For now, I'll define them here, but we'll move them. Icon props is equal to read only, of course. Width, number, height, number. What else do we need? Fill, which is string. What else? I think that's it. I might be missing something. If I'm missing something, I'll add it later. Now, width and height are necessary. Fill also is. Yeah, all of these are required. And set props to icon props. And I'll set the width, height, and fill. Okay, it's pretty good. Now, the next step is to move this. I don't want to add these icon props to every SVG, to every icon, because icons will be multiple items here, all of these icons basically. So these are going to a separate file. And as I want to have a single icon component, I don't want to import plus icon, then if I change the icon, remove that plus icon component instance and import calendar icon, etc. I want a single icon component, to which I just pass a type prop and it changes between these SVGs. So to achieve that in components, I'll create an icon, a separate icon component, which will be a little bit of work, but in terms of maintainability later, it will be easier for me. So that will be icon tsx, and these type definitions will be at the same place, and I'll export them from here. So these icons will just import the props, the prop types from their parent component, in a kind of parent component. All right, so this is how an icon will look like for now. And now the icon component. First of all, I need an enum. No, that will be later. Let's define the component. It will be just icon, and it will return. Yeah, for now, it will just return this icon. Okay. All right. It will receive props, which will also be icon props, the same props, and we'll pass them to basically each icon. And how are we going to differentiate between icons? There will be a type prop, which will be an enum type, which I have to define icon types. And I will say plus equal to 1. This will make sure that the enum starts from 1 and goes upwards, because I don't want 0, it's falsy, basically the reason why. And this will be icon type, icon types, yeah. And based on that prop, there will be switch case here. I will switch props type. And if the case is that it's icon types plus, I'll return the plus icon. All right. And I'll list each individual icon right here. Yeah, that's a little bit of work. I have to add them in the enum. But when I use the icon component, it's a single component, which is great. Now let's create a storybook for it to test it. Again, I just copy the button story for simplicity, and I'll rename it to icon stories. Okay, import icon from icon, icon. Layout centered is fine. Type of icon. So metadata is done. I will leave I'll just create a story code. What is it? Plus icon. And type will be, let's import icon type types. I don't export that. I need to export that for sure. I will use it like this. The type will be icon types plus. In this case, let's say arcs. Let me see. Type icon types. Oh yeah, of course. I also need width, height, all that. For the storybook demo. So I'll go with 100, 100 height, and black fill. Okay, great. Let me open my storybook icon plus. Okay, icon tsx does not provide an export named icon types. Let me see. I need to save, probably. Here's my icon. And here in the docs, now you see the actual archetype controls. I can change the size easily, make it red, for example. And yeah, here, because it's an enum, we don't see the actual type plus, etc. We just see one. But I will list all icons here as actual stories. So that will be fine. Okay, great. And this is how you use it. Although the type is not correct again, but all right. So we have an icon now, and we can use it to actually show the icon button. And I'll go to the button tsx file. The icon will be what? Yeah, sorry. I will import the icon component here. Let me see. An icon, yeah. That is correct. And this will be type of icon. Sorry, that's not correct. I actually completely forgot that. I need the React component type and pass its props there. And children needs to be a React node, actually. Okay. And here in icon, I think I export icon props. Yes. So I'll import icon props and pass them. Okay. So that's how you specify the component prop type. And now we use it. We need one more span, only in case we have props icon. So if we have props icon, then we will, basically render this JSX. Else, no, it's valid JSX. And in that case, I'll render icon, props icon, sorry. What is wrong? Yeah, we need props. We know that very well. All right, let's just render some width and height, and then we'll see how we'll pass those. We'll definitely have defaults. Here, the expected width and height of an icon is what? First of all, fill. I think I can pass current color. I should be able to. Width and height 13, 14. So 13 width, 14 height. I'll do 14 for both. That's doesn't matter in this case. They expect integers, of course. All right. And what else? Yeah, that should be it. Can I take a look now? How should I take a look? I need to create a story. Exactly. Here we have arguments. So we need, what do we need? Oh yeah, the string is no longer assignable to that type. Why not? It's just React Node. Oh, wait. This needs to update. What do we have? Let me restart the storybook first. Yeah, it works correctly. Children's string, why does it still? Oh, that's the button. Yeah, I changed it. Button props, modified. Why does it still insist that children is a string? Because I pass it as a string in the parameters? Is that it? Oh yeah. I mean, string is valid in this case. Yeah, as it says, React Node is string, number, boolean, React element, or undefined. And it does even work, which is, yeah, whatever. I will call this simple, basic, and this icon. All right. Okay, this will be icon button, and we will pass an icon to it, which has to actually be React component. So I will import that. I think I can do that in Storybook. I hope so. Let me see. Yeah, refers to a value. All right. And the type will be icon types was. Let's see. Okay, I can't. I think that's pretty clear. Duplicate decoration is icon. Really? Oh yeah, I have a duplicate decoration indeed. So that will be icon. Yeah, icon button is fine. Okay, and now we have. Okay, that took a bit of troubleshooting actually. Let me just reinstate the previous story because I removed it, the basic case. Basic case for a button is basically arcs, which are children, just button. All right. Ignore the IntelliSense error right now. Children is valid as string. And ignore this IntelliSense error because the JSX element is also valid as a return of error and it compiles correctly. So here we render the entire component. I don't pass it as an arc. I made a mistake here. I previously didn't define an icon as a component itself and rendered it. That's absolutely unnecessary. We just need the icon type. So I imported it. The icon will be just icon type. And if it is defined and truthy, we will render that icon. And now when I save, I get the basic case and my icon button. Now the last step is to style this span first. Add a class name to it. No, not like this. It will be styles button icon like this. And let's open the styles module. Button icon basically. It's padding. I think it has the same padding, but let me see. It should have the same padding, theoretically speaking. 12, 12, and 7, right? No, 10 actually. Does it make sense? Yeah, it makes sense. So I'll change it. Because the icon is lower in height, usually in square. 714. Okay. Let me see. Yeah, I have padding. Last step, set the button display to flex. Automatically becomes a row. And here we will actually where? Right here. Align items, center, justify content, center. What will that do? Yeah, that would make it work in theory. Let's just inspect. There's some optically it's not centered. Why is that? Yeah. This has a higher padding. This has lower vertical padding. That's normal. I'm guessing this line height, basically. Should be something like 1.1, probably. Primary test button. All right. This is adjustable, but let's first add some normal text to the story so that we can see it because this test is not okay. Yeah, primary icon button. All right. Yeah, it works great. And this needs a different background, which will be opacity based, just some dark overlay. I'll set it to background color with alpha. I think 10%. Yeah, exactly. However, will work. Overflow hidden we need here. We have some, let me zoom in. You can see the overlay overflows. That's easily fixable. In this case, the button gets overflow hidden and we have our button. Great. Now the next thing I need to take into consideration for the button, open it, is these widths and heights of the icon are hard-coded. Current color is absolutely fine. Widths and heights I might want to change. So I will icon width and icon height. And these will be optional, of course, because in most cases I don't expect to use these props, only if necessary. So I'll say icon width or 14, props and width, and props icon height or 14. All right. Yeah, nothing changes, but if it does, I get my arguments here. And the basic cases. Let's open the docs. Yeah. All right. Pretty happy how that works out. Now, there is something I didn't take into consideration. Ideally, buttons should be the same height. the- First of all, the extra padding, the icon button. You know, it gives some spacing, but makes icon buttons always larger by default. I don't like that. That's terrible because you frequently might have buttons next to each other. And in general, they should be the same height universally. So let's inspect that. First of all, the button in base height is something like 35.33. Okay, this at this stage is 42. If I just lower, just unify the padding here to also be like this. Really? Okay. Yeah, if I just change it, it will probably 35.33, 35.33. So this is absolutely going to be the same padding. And I'll set it like this. Just save a few lines. Oh, I didn't see that, but that's absolutely correct. And now I don't need that and that. And icon will just be background color. Great. That's great. Okay, let's see. Yeah, everything should be fine now. 3533, 3533. I have my hover states, my on click. All right, that's great. So my button is done. My icon component is done. I need to add the other versions, except plus. I only have the plus icon, but I will add these. That's not an issue. Now, I was planning to also do what? The inputs. But as the video is getting too long, I think I'll split these. I might do 2 videos for the tables, models, and form components, or 1 video, we'll see how it goes. But I'll end it right here with icons and buttons and the setup of Storybook, which took a significant amount of time. And next video we'll pick up and work on these more complicated components. With this, I'll wrap today's video. If you enjoy the content and the series, don't forget to subscribe to get notified when another video is released. Take care.